What is intermittent fasting? Should you try it? And I'll share with you my experiences of intermittent fasting and what makes it a lifestyle, not a diet. Welcome back to Live Free TV. My name is Sarah, Live Free Warrior. We're talking about intermittent fasting, and it's something that I've been doing actually for the past, I will say 5 to 6 months, and it's shortening. Here's the important part. Intermittent fasting is not a diet. I do not do diets. I do not recommend to do diets. And in fact, I try and keep that word out of my vocabulary for many reasons. Now, it's more about an eating pattern. That's what makes it so different, that it's not a diet. It's not telling you what to eat, how much to eat, it's telling you just when. So you're shortening the span of time that you consume food. There are a few different ways that you can do intermittent fasting, and it is either every other day that you're doing it. I don't personally choose to. I'll get to that in a minute why. Or you can consume all of your food within an 8-hour period, fasting for 16 hours. That's the method that I choose. I choose not to do the day fast because I have a history of eating disorders, and I know myself it's really important to understand the why behind I'm doing something when I change my consumption of food. I need to make sure in my mind that it has nothing to do with an eating disorder, it has everything to do with how I feel. And if you're thinking, is this for you to try? Is it intermittent fasting something you should try? Get clear on your why you're trying it. And when you're actually doing it, if you do, understand if you're receiving back the benefits, how you feel that you want to. And if not, find something else. There are so many other methodologies out there for eating that it's worth it to try and experiment. Because in the end, it's your life and you have to love how you feel living it. Some of the benefits that go with intermittent fasting, and something I've personally found too, I have more energy. I feel stronger than I did before if I was consuming more frequently. I feel leaner, but in a muscular way. I don't need to it's not about losing weight. Let me just promise you that one. And it's more about being lean, and also helps. These are big things. It helps with my focus and my mental clarity. And another one that's really important, I sleep better. I'm not eating as close to bedtime because I close off that window for myself. So I've been sleeping a lot better. That's my why for continuing to do intermittent fasting. It's not always as easy when I'm traveling because time zones are thrown off, my stomach doesn't always know, but right now in this stay home, stay safe period, it's a real great example that this is the way I'd like to live my life. So when I wake up in the morning, here's how it kind of works for myself. I wake up and I have my coffee in the morning. First things first, let's back that train up. I have 2 cups of water in the morning when I first wake up because you need to rehydrate your body. Then I go to the coffee with my collagen powder. Please hold. Okay. And that's usually what I'll have in the morning. Then I'll work out. I don't do a fully strenuous workout, but I will do some yoga stretching. I'll go outside for a run/walk. I'll do some abs inside the home. And then around 12, 1 o'clock, I will have my first meal of the day. And that's a pretty decent sized meal that I'll be eating. Sometimes I'll have a snack in the afternoon if I'm still hungry, around say 4 or 5, and then usually husband and I have dinner around 7:30, and I close that window off at 8. So that gives me between 12 and 8, or like 12:30 and 8:30 to eat, and then I don't eat in between there. And by closing off that gap, I typically go to bed around 11 p.m. That helps me to sleep so much better. Now, when I shared about doing intermittent fasting on my Insta story, some of you wrote in and saying, yes, I would love to learn more about this. So that's why we're doing this video. My friend Sarah Dandashy on the West Coast also wrote in that she practices intermittent fasting. She's a travel expert, so we connected from there, but we have so many of our overlaps, not to mention she has an awesome name, just saying. So I'm gonna cut to, Sarah, if you're here, we're gonna cut to you and tell me a little bit about your experience with intermittent fasting.
So I have to say, when I first started hearing of people talk about intermittent fasting, it definitely piqued my interest. And I was like, well, that's and just understanding, even as they kind of describe the science behind it, and as far as like you're literally like giving your digestive system a break, and I figured, I was like, let me just try this and just see how I feel. So the method that I did was the what is it? It's the 16-8. So I only eat for 8 hours a day. So for me, what worked best for my schedule is that I could start eating, I would break my fast at noon, and then I would just have to finish eating by 8 p.m. That just worked for my timeline, just because so often I also work late. So if I stopped eating at 6 p.m., that almost felt a little too early, but I could feel like I could hold off a little bit more in the morning. So that was why I chose that particular timing. And I found multiple things happened. One thing, my energy went through the roof. I had so much energy. And then what I also found was sort of like a byproduct of it, is that when it came time to me first, like when it came time to me eating, I was so deliberate in the choices that I was making. And yeah, I'm already pretty conscious as far as like what I'm eating, but I was really, really extra careful that I wanted to make sure that I was really nourishing myself with every bite I took, because in essence, I was like, I only have a limited time to eat. So if I'm going to eat, I really want to make sure that I'm providing the most nutrition for my body in that amount of time. And I definitely noticed, a bit of a weight loss. I didn't notice a huge weight loss, but what I felt is like I could eat more also. But again, I was just eating more intelligently, more intuitively. And so it actually, for me, it was just such a pleasant experience. And I just felt like my body really enjoyed the break and the time off
You
for the
brought up,
rest of the day.
and you bring up something that is, it's a perspective that I didn't think of, and it's fascinating because you were filling that time with nutrients, and you were saying, okay, if I have this time period, I want to jam pack it with the best that I can. And to me, I hadn't thought of it that way, and I think that that is so, it's a beautiful byproduct, and
Absolutely.
it's a great perspective to add to it.
And I think, and again, it's exactly that. It was a byproduct. I didn't go into it thinking, oh, that. It was just more of like, wow, I've done this for my body so far and it's good. And now I have this complete clean slate. Like, what am I choosing to put into it? And so it's like lots of leafy greens and avocado and lemon. And it was just, if I would look at anything that wasn't that, I just was like, why would I want to put that in my body? I don't want to put chips in my body right now. Like, oh, that sounds like, ooh. And then I also noticed, interestingly enough, is that because I do have a bit of a sweet tooth. I say a little bit, and people close to me would probably be like, ha ha, you have a big sweet tooth. I was like, okay, fine. But I noticed that kind of a little bit later on in the day, sort of when I had that slump, whether it was like 4 or 5 p.m., I could have like a little bit of chocolate, dark chocolate, something like that. And I didn't feel guilty having it. And I think so often that if I would have that, I would feel guilty. And I'd even feel almost a little bit like sluggish for eating it. And again, I noticed that I could have some of and again, it's, within reason, it's not a crazy amount, but I could treat myself to something sweet like that. And I didn't feel guilty. And I also didn't feel like bleh and
Weighed
sluggish
down.
after eating it as well. So that I thought was a nice byproduct as well.
It's the power of the mind too, and how we phrase things and the perspective of, for sure. And that's where I think there's a big difference with, I prosed earlier in this video that it's not a diet, and that's the biggest thing. It's really about an eating pattern and how you're changing it. Have you ever, what is your take on that? Because people say, oh, a diet's not for me. I don't want to diet. And I've always failed in the past with diets. What's your take on that?
Well, so it's funny because I'm not a diet person either. I'm just because it's like I've definitely had times in my life where I was far more restrictive on what I ate. And so I kind of got to a point that I was like, I just like the idea of a diet is like just not. I'm already a vegetarian as is. So it's like I'm a vegetarian. I'm like, now what are we going to add to the mix? Like, and by the way, when I say that I'm a vegetarian, I don't see that my diet is limited. It's just more of like, what else am I getting? You know what I mean? It's like, that's one part of it. And I don't feel like I need a diet per se, as I'm just, because I'm already making a conscious decision to eat just lots of raw, like fruits and vegetables and whole food as opposed to processed food. So that's, but I think that as I studied nutrition and I understood food, not professionally, but just because of my interest in it, that's, for me, a diet never really was like the way to go, but it was like making these lifestyle changes. And so that's understanding that. I totally get it when people are like, I don't want to diet, but intermittent fasting to me, it didn't feel like a diet, because I also felt like, oh, I can eat whatever I want in this time frame. And I didn't feel limited, but the byproduct was, is that I wanted to eat better.
It's very, very spot on, and it makes sense completely. How long have you been practicing, or we'll say practicing, but how long have you been following with intermittent fasting for?
I started intermittent fasting, I would say maybe 9 months ago. So it hasn't been that long per se, but it and I do find it a little bit challenging when I'm traveling. I try to start it when when I'm traveling, and then, but you know, a lot of times when I travel, I am traveling for work, and so it's such crazy hours, and you know, it's, food is not the first concern when we're necessarily working. It's more of like to get you going. So I do ease up on it when I'm traveling at times. Uh, but when I'm at home and in a routine, I find it does wonders. It also sets the tone for my day. And okay, this is going to sound really weird saying this. I feel like it also like frees up my day, because it's like a good chunk of my day that I'm like, I'm not worrying about what I'm eating. I'm like, we're not eating right now. So it's like all morning to just like get into this groove until I end up breaking my fast. And then, you know, then I start eating for the day. But it's, I almost found that I would eat almost like two bigger-ish meals, or I'd eat like one big meal around noon, and then a little bit of not as large of a meal, but towards the end of the day, maybe six-ish. So I also think that's better as well too, is that you really just like eat your largest meal in the middle of the day when you're having the time to burn everything off.
And we practice very similar times and structures when we're at home. Same thing, 12 to 8. I eat a bigger meal during the day, and for exactly the reason that you said. And I was going to go there next. When you're traveling, how does that change? Because you have time zones, you have meetings, you have, you know, we're taking photos and all these other things.
It's tough. It's tough. But what I always travel with is I actually have these like vitamin packs that I can mix in water, kind of like an emergency type sort of thing. But I have a little bit of a different brand that I use. So I might not adhere to that strict of a time frame for intermittent fasting, but I might at least have the idea of like, maybe like don't eat for 12 hours and then during 12 hours. So do a 12-12, which is a lighter version of it. But why I mentioned the vitamins and mixing that in water is I always struggle with drinking enough water, just because that's, again, I'm like thinking about 25 other things, not thinking about the water that I need, but like we need it so much, and especially when we're traveling. So why I bring these sort of like vitamin packs is that it does flavor the water. There's no calories to it. And, but it is just kind of like an extra boost of energy because you're making sure that you're getting your vitamins. So I put that in my water, and it's a great way that I end up staying hydrated. And it also just buys me a little bit more time to just stay full before I'm like, okay, I got to eat.
And sometimes you reach that point too where you're like, you know what? Forget it. I'm just going to eat. And do you think that's okay too? You know?
Well, yeah, absolutely. You have to be mindful of your body. And it's like sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, it's 11:30. And you know, I also, you know, I work at a hotel at times, and it's like, well, it's 11:30 and I can't go to lunch at 12. I have to go now. So fine, I'll start at 11:30. You know, you work with yourself in regards to that. But like even today, so today I woke up at 5:30. Because I had a bunch of meetings already early in the morning at 5:30. I woke up at 5:30. I was like, I'm hungry already. Oh my gosh, this is going to be an interesting morning. So I just drank a bunch of water, which has been a new thing that I've really been mindful of. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not eating now. So, and then I ended up breaking my fast today. It was probably like 11:30. But imagine, I mean, that was like 6 more hours where maybe, old Sarah would have been like, oh, let me eat this and this. And it's fine. But it just kind of almost would start like a domino effect of like what you're eating for the day.
And that it's a good point and tip that you give is try drinking water instead. I was going to ask that for anyone who's thinking maybe I want to try this is, if it's new to you, did you struggle in the beginning? And any tips that you can provide to anybody?
Well, it's interesting. The idea of it was daunting. It was totally daunting. And how I started into it, it was I think it was a weekend, and it was one of those weekends that I finally was able to catch up on sleep. And so just by chance, I think I'd probably slept like 9 or 10 hours, something crazy, obviously not a normal thing, but I'd already slept so much. And then I was up and I was like, oh, well, I mean, I've already kind of spent this much time. If I just don't eat for another 3 hours, I will have hit my like 16 hours. So because I started off of that, that was an easy way to kind of get started. And it wasn't as daunting. I think the idea of being like, oh my gosh, I'm not eating for 16 hours, it can be scary, but that you don't have to do it like how I did it. I just happened to do it off of a long sleep. But a lot of people, they're like, okay, don't do 16 hours at first. Try doing 12 and 12, and taper off that way. And you'll notice that it's really not that. I mean, there was definitely a point where I was like, oh, I wonder if I can do it where I only eat for 4 hours in a day, which is an even more extreme version. It's like, okay, simmer down. We're good. But once you get into it, it's not as difficult as you think.
And myself, I've struggled with eating disorders in the past. So for me, it's like, it's a fine line of, is this helping me or is this another form of control? So yes, you're right. For us who are like type A people and like, I can challenge myself, that's great self-awareness to say like, okay, let's ease up a little bit and, doing the 8 hours. Great tips to ease in as well. It's like if you're trying to sleep earlier or you want to, wake up earlier, do little half-hour increments here and there. And it's just you're retraining your system and, just like the circadian rhythm for food as well. So any other tips or takeaways for anybody who is, newer to or intrigued by anything that you want to share?
I just say, try it. And again, just ease into it. If it's piqued your interest, there's probably some part of you that could really benefit from it, whether you know it or not. I mean, I've seen people, they've cleared up their skin from it. They've helped their digestion from it. Those are not necessarily issues that I had going into it, but I think my biggest benefit is it just made me appreciate what I ate so much more. And again, it was this happy byproduct. So if you are at all interested, try it and just ease into it and see what you discover, because you might discover, oh wow, I didn't really realize I had a sensitive stomach until I realized how much better I felt. So I don't know, to me it just scientifically makes sense. And I think anytime that you can give your body a break from normal things and normal routines is a good thing, because our body does so many great things for us. I mean, our bodies are literally keeping us alive every single day as we are exposing it to pollutants, to chemicals, to what we're drinking, to what we're eating. And it's like, it still keeps going. So I don't know. I just think it's a nice thing to do for your body, and everybody should give it a try.
A little bit of self-care and talk about the ultimate pause, what we're all going through right now, and a good way to keep us grounded and connected. And it's a great time to try things. So Sarah, thank you so much for your input and experience. And as always, your positive light and energy. Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you, Sarah, for that interview and your insight and your personal experience. Hopefully you found that useful as well. Sarah is a wealth of knowledge. You're going to want to follow her, Ask a Concierge, on Instagram. She shares a lot of different mind and travel tips, a lot to learn and take away from this incredible woman. Now, going back to intermittent fasting, again, the best way to try out is just give it a try and see if it's for you. If it works, great. And if not, you have to be honest with yourself too and say, you know what, this isn't really for me. If you find yourself miserable from not eating after, a week or two of trying it, don't do it, because nobody wants to be around a miserable person just because they have a little more energy in the morning. Find another way. Don't be miserable. No, miserable people are not fun. 3 takeaway tips from all of this. Give it a go, trial and error. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Don't get too stuck on it and say, this is my answer. Just give it a try and see how it goes. The second one is to be flexible. You're gonna have to be flexible because, especially like I said, when traveling, it's not always that easy. And the most important part of all of this, focus on the feeling. Does it feel good to practice this pattern of eating? If it does, then stick to it. If it doesn't, move on. Write in below if you've tried intermittent fasting or any questions that you have further on this from myself or even from Sarah, and we'll get back to you shortly. Follow me here on Live Free TV, subscribing to this channel. Follow me on Instagram at Live Free Warrior, sharing daily updates there, and I look forward to sharing more with you health related from around the world. And right now, home here in Miami. Signing off as your host, Sarah, Live Free Warrior. Speaking of, I'm hungry and it's time to eat. Move over, coffee. We have comida.